What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected legends sits across from television's most provocative host and absolutely everything goes wrong? You won't believe what unfolds when Robert De Niro steps into Bill Maher's domain and refuses to play by the rules. This isn't your typical celebrity interview. This is a masterclass in how ego, politics, and raw emotion can explode into television gold that had viewers glued to their screens and social media buzzing within minutes. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two titans clash in what can only be described as one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. The tension was palpable from the moment Robert De Niro walked onto the set of Real Time with Bill Maher. The legendary actor, known for his measured public appearances and selective interviews, had agreed to appear on the show to discuss his latest film projects and perhaps touch on some current events. What nobody expected was that this seemingly routine celebrity interview would spiral into a confrontation that would have viewers picking sides and questioning everything they thought they knew about both men. Bill Maher, ever the provocateur, seemed particularly energized that evening. His opening monologue had already pushed several boundaries, touching on controversial political topics with his signature blend of smugness and supposed intellectualism. The audience was warmed up, expecting the usual Maher formula of edgy commentary, mixed with celebrity banter. But as De Niro settled into the guest chair, something in the air felt different. The interview began innocuously enough, with Maher making his typical jokes about Hollywood and asking De Niro about his upcoming projects. The actor, dressed in his characteristic understated style, answered with his usual gravitas, discussing his craft with the respect it deserved. But Maher, perhaps sensing an opportunity to create a viral moment, began steering the conversation toward more contentious territory. "You know, Bob," Maher said with that familiar smirk, "you've been pretty vocal about politics lately. Some people are saying actors should stick to acting. What do you think about that?" De Niro's expression shifted slightly, a barely perceptible tightening around his eyes that anyone familiar with his work would recognize as a warning sign. "I think people have a right to speak their minds, Bill. That's what democracy is about." Sure, Maher replied, leaning back in his chair with an air of superiority. "But don't you think there's something a little rich about millionaire actors lecturing regular Americans about their problems? I mean, when's the last time you worried about paying rent?" The audience shifted uncomfortably as De Niro's jaw clenched. This wasn't the playful banter they were used to seeing on the show. This felt different, more personal, more pointed. Maher seemed to be deliberately poking at something deeper. "I grew up in Little Italy," De Niro responded, his voice maintaining its characteristic calm, but with an edge creeping in. "I know what it's like to struggle. Just because I've been successful doesn't mean I've forgotten where I came from or that I can't care about other people." Maher chuckled dismissively, a sound that seemed to grate against De Niro's composure. "Come on, that was like 60 years ago. You've been living in penthouses and flying private jets for decades. Don't you think you might be a little out of touch?" The actor's hands gripped the armrests of his chair more tightly. "You want to talk about being out of touch? You sit here every week making jokes about serious issues, treating everything like it's entertainment. Real people are suffering out there. Hey, comedy is how we process difficult topics." Maher shot back, his tone becoming more defensive. "At least I'm honest about what I do. I don't pretend to be some moral authority because I can memorize lines and look tough on screen." The silence that followed was deafening. The studio audience, unsure whether this was scripted conflict or genuine animosity, sat frozen. De Niro stared at Maher with an intensity that had intimidated countless actors and directors over the years, but the talk show host seemed oblivious to the gravity of what he had just said. "You know what your problem is, Bill?" De Niro finally spoke, his voice low and controlled in a way that somehow made it more menacing than if he had shouted. "You think being cynical makes you smart. You think tearing people down makes you clever. But all it really makes you is small." Maher's face flushed slightly, his usual confidence wavering for just a moment before he attempted to regain control of the situation. "Look, Bob, I respect your work, I really do. But this whole righteous indignation thing you've got going on, it's getting a little old, don't you think?" The condescension in Maher's voice was unmistakable, and something in De Niro's expression shifted again. The measured control that had defined his public persona for decades began to crack, revealing something raw and angry underneath. Getting old, De Niro repeated, his voice rising slightly. You want to know what's getting old? Watching people like you turn everything into a punchline. There are real consequences to the things you joke about. Real people getting hurt. Mar seemed to realize he had pushed too far, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. Instead, he doubled down with the kind of arrogance that had made him both famous and reviled. Oh, spare me the lecture, Bob. You Hollywood liberals are all the same. You live in your bubble and think you understand the real world. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone in that studio could sense that something was about to explode. De Niro's eyes narrowed to slits, his entire body radiating the kind of controlled fury that had made him legendary in roles like Travis Bickle and Jake LaMotta. The audience held its collective breath, sensing they were about to witness something unprecedented. But what happened next would surpass even their wildest expectations, as this war of words was about to escalate into something far more explosive than anyone could have imagined. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before De Niro leaned forward in his chair, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout could have managed. You know what, Bill? I've been doing this for over 50 years. I've worked with the best directors, the greatest actors, and I've never not once encountered someone as fundamentally disrespectful as you are right now. Mar's attempt at a dismissive laugh came out as more of a nervous chuckle. Come on, Bob, don't be so dramatic. This is just a conversation between two guys who disagree. Just a conversation. De Niro's voice cracked like a whip. You invited me here to talk about my work, my life, and instead you're sitting there like some kind of judge, dismissing everything I've said, everything I believe in. You think this is entertainment. The camera operators were having a field day, zooming in on both men's faces as the tension ratcheted up to unbearable levels. Maher, perhaps sensing he was losing control of his own show, tried to steer things back to safer ground, but it was already too late. The damage was done, and De Niro was just getting started. You want to talk about being out of touch? De Niro continued, his hands now gesturing emphatically. You sit behind this desk every week, protected by your writers and your producers, taking cheap shots at people who can't fight back. That's not comedy, Bill. That's cowardice. The audience gasped audibly at this direct assault on Maher's character. This wasn't the playful sparring they were accustomed to seeing on late-night television. This was personal, visceral, and completely unscripted. Maher's face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, and something that might have been fear. Now wait just a minute, Maher said, his voice rising to match De Niro's intensity. I've been doing this show for over 20 years. I've taken on politicians, corporations, religious leaders, people a lot more powerful than some actor having a temper tantrum. The word tantrum seemed to hit De Niro like a physical blow. His entire demeanor shifted, and for a moment, viewers could see the street kid from Little Italy that existed beneath the Hollywood legend. Tantrum, he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. You think this is a tantrum? I think you're overreacting to some legitimate questions, Maher replied, his tone patronizing in a way that made the situation infinitely worse. Maybe you should take a deep breath and remember where you are. That was the moment everything changed. De Niro stood up from his chair with such sudden force that it rolled backward several feet. The audience collectively inhaled, and several people in the front row visibly recoiled. The actor's full height and presence filled the frame as he stared down at Maher, who suddenly looked very small behind his desk. Remember where I am. De Niro's voice was now fully unleashed, all pretense of civility abandoned. I'm in a studio with a man who thinks he's smarter than everyone else, who hides behind jokes when he gets called out, who treats his guests like props in his little comedy show. Maher, clearly rattled but trying to maintain some semblance of control, gestured weakly toward De Niro's chair. Bob, please sit down. Let's just calm down and dash. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. De Niro cut him off, his voice echoing through the studio. You've been disrespectful from the moment I walked out here. You've questioned my intelligence, my background, my right to have opinions. And now you want me to calm down. The production staff was in chaos. Cameras were frantically adjusting to capture the confrontation from every angle, while producers off camera were frantically whispering into their headsets. This was either going to be the most talked about moment in the show's history or a complete disaster that would need to be heavily edited before broadcast. Maher, perhaps realizing the gravity of the situation, attempted one last time to regain control. Look, Bob, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. This is how the show works. We have spirited debates. We challenge each other's ideas. It's nothing personal. Nothing personal. De Niro's laugh was bitter and harsh. You've made it personal from the first question. You've attacked my character, my motivations, my entire life's work. And then you have the audacity to sit there and tell me it's nothing personal. The actor began pacing behind his chair, his movements sharp and agitated. Every person in that studio could feel the rage radiating from him like heat from a furnace. This wasn't acting. This was raw, unfiltered human emotion on display in a way that nobody had expected to see. Maher, his usual smug confidence completely evaporated, tried one more time to salvage the situation. Bob, I think maybe we should take a commercial break and dash. No. De Niro snapped, whirling around to face him. No commercial break. No timeout. You wanted to have this conversation, Bill, so let's have it. Right here, right now. The tension in the studio was so thick, it was almost suffocating. Audience members were looking around nervously, unsure whether they should stay or leave. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of what was rapidly becoming one of the most explosive moments in television history. You know what your real problem is? De Niro continued, his voice now carrying the full weight of his decades of experience and success. You're not half as smart as you think you are, and you're twice as cruel as you need to be. You've built your entire career on tearing other people down, and you think that makes you some kind of truth teller. Maher opened his mouth to respond, but De Niro wasn't finished. The floodgates had opened, and years of frustration with the media, with cynicism, with people who treated serious issues as punchlines, came pouring out. I've spent my entire career trying to tell stories that matter, working with people who care about their craft, who respect the process. And then I come here and get treated like some kind of dancing monkey by someone who wouldn't last 5 minutes doing what I do. The personal nature of the attack clearly stung Maher, who finally found his voice again. That's rich, coming from someone who pretends to be other people for a living. At least I'm honest about who I am. This response proved to be the final straw, and what happened next would push their confrontation beyond the point of no return, into territory that neither man could come back from. De Niro's face went through a transformation that was both terrifying and mesmerizing to witness. The controlled fury that had been simmering beneath the surface finally erupted in all its devastating glory. His eyes blazed with an intensity that made his most memorable film performances pale in comparison, because this wasn't acting. This was the real Robert De Niro, stripped of all Hollywood pretense and media training. Pretends to be other people. De Niro's voice was now a roar that filled every corner of the studio. You think what I do is pretending? You arrogant, self-righteous piece of garbage. I've spent 50 years perfecting my craft, studying human nature, understanding what it means to be real. And you sit behind this desk making jokes about things you don't understand, people you've never met, situations you've never experienced. The audience was completely silent now, some people covering their mouths in shock, others pulling out their phones to record what was clearly going to be legendary television. Maher sat frozen behind his desk. His usual quick wit completely abandoned him as he faced the full force of De Niro's wrath. At least when I create a character, I do it with respect, with research, with dedication, De Niro continued, now pointing directly at Maher. You create this character of yourself, this supposed intellectual, this truth teller, and it's the phoniest performance I've ever seen. You're not honest, Bill. You're a fraud hiding behind a desk and a laugh track. Maher finally found his voice, but it came out weak and defensive. Bob, you're way out of line here. This is my show, and I don't have to sit here and take this kind of abuse from anyone, including you. Your show. De Niro laughed, but it was a sound devoid of any humor. This isn't a show, Bill. This is a circus, and you're the clown. And I'm done being part of your act. The actor turned as if to leave, but then whipped back around, his finger jabbing in Maher's direction. You know what the difference is between you and me? When I play a character, the audience knows I'm acting. When you play yourself, You're so fake that nobody can tell what's real anymore." Maher's face was now flushed red with anger and embarrassment. Being dressed down on his own show, in front of his own audience, by one of the most respected actors in Hollywood was clearly more than his ego could handle. You want to talk about fake? You've been coasting on the same tough guy persona for decades. Travis Bickle, Jake LaMotta. It's all the same character with different clothes. This attack on his body of work was exactly the wrong thing to say. De Niro's entire body tensed like a coiled spring, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of every role he'd ever inhabited, every emotion he'd ever channeled, every truth he'd ever tried to bring to the screen. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said, each word precisely delivered like bullets from a gun. Those characters, every single one of them, came from something real. They came from observation, from empathy, from understanding the human condition. What do your jokes come from, Bill? What do your opinions come from? Spite? Jealousy? The need to feel superior to everyone else? The production staff was in complete panic mode now. This had gone so far beyond anything that could be salvaged. With editing that several people were openly discussing whether they should cut the cameras entirely. But the footage was too compelling, too raw, too unprecedented to stop recording. Maher, his composure completely shattered, made one final desperate attempt to regain some control. "You think you're better than me because you're in movies? Because you've got awards? Well, let me tell you something, Bob. I've been speaking truth to power while you've been playing dress up." The silence that followed was deafening. De Niro stared at Maher with such concentrated disdain that several audience members actually shifted in their seats, feeling the discomfort radiating across the entire studio. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet again, but now it carried a finality that everyone could recognize. "Truth to power," De Niro repeated slowly. "You wouldn't recognize truth if it walked up and introduced itself. You're not speaking to power, Bill. You are the power. You're part of the machine that turns everything into entertainment, that reduces real human suffering into punchlines for your audience to laugh at." He began walking toward the edge of the stage, but he wasn't done yet. Turning back one more time, he delivered what would become the most quoted lines from the entire confrontation. "I came here tonight thinking I was going to have a conversation with a professional. Instead, I find myself wasting time with a bitter little man who's convinced himself that cynicism is wisdom and cruelty is comedy." His voice rose again, building to a crescendo that would be replayed countless times across social media. "You want to know what's real, Bill? This is real. This anger, this disgust, this complete lack of respect I have for what you do and who you are, that's the realest thing that's happened on this show in years." Maher, now desperate and grasping for any way to salvage his dignity, stood up from behind his desk. "You can't talk to me like this. This is my show, my studio, and I won't be disrespected by some has-been actor who can't handle a little criticism." The words "has-been" seemed to echo through the studio like a gunshot. De Niro stopped dead in his tracks, slowly turned around, and for a moment, everyone in that room thought they were about to witness something that would end up on the evening news for all the wrong reasons. But instead of physical violence, De Niro delivered something far more devastating. His voice, when it came, was controlled again, but filled with such withering contempt that it was arguably more destructive than any punch could have been. "Has been," he repeated, almost wonderingly. "I'm 79 years old, and I'm still working, still creating, still pushing myself to find new truths in my work. What are you going to be doing when you're my age, Bill? Still sitting behind this desk, making the same tired jokes about the same tired topics to an audience that's getting smaller every year?" He paused, letting that sink in before delivering the final blow. "You call me a has-been, but at least I was something to begin with. Your never was trying to tear down people who actually accomplished something with their lives." Maher's face went white, then red, then white again. The humiliation was total and complete, broadcast live to millions of viewers and being recorded by dozens of phones in the audience. In a last desperate attempt to have the final word, he shouted across the studio, "Get out. Just get the hell out of here. Security." De Niro smiled for the first time all evening, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Don't worry, Bill. I wouldn't stay in this place another second if you paid me." He looked directly into the camera, addressing the audience at home. "Folks, you deserve better than this. You deserve hosts who respect their guests, who engage with ideas instead of attacking people, who understand that real conversation requires real respect. As he walked toward the exit, Maher couldn't help himself from getting in one last shot. Yeah, well, go fuck yourself, Bob. De Niro stopped, turned around one final time, and delivered the line that would become legendary. Go fuck yourself? No, Bill. Go fuck yourself. And when you're done with that, take a long look in the mirror and ask yourself what happened to whatever decency you might have had once upon a time. With that, Robert De Niro walked off the set of Real Time with Bill Maher, leaving behind a stunned audience, a humiliated host, and a moment in television history that would be talked about for years to come. The cameras kept rolling as Maher sat behind his desk, visibly shaken, unable to find words to fill the dead air that followed. De Niro's exit, the confrontation was over, but its impact was just beginning. Social media exploded within minutes, with clips of the argument spreading faster than wildfire. The raw authenticity of De Niro's anger, combined with his articulate dismantling of Maher's persona, resonated with viewers who had grown tired of the host's increasingly cynical approach to political and social commentary. As the studio lights dimmed and the audience filed out in stunned silence, one thing was abundantly clear. This wasn't just a celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a masterclass in how real emotion and genuine conviction could cut through years of media polish and manufactured controversy to reveal something absolutely authentic. Robert De Niro had reminded everyone what it looked like when someone refused to play the game, refused to be diminished, and refused to let disrespect slide in the name of entertainment. The legendary actor had walked into that studio as a guest and walked out as something else entirely. A man who had drawn a line in the sand and defended it with everything he had.